Hello, and welcome to yet another Beyond Threats podcast by Bleckmann. I am your host, Erik Janssen Steenberg, and today we will be taking another deep dive in the trends and developments of fashion and lifestyle logistics. And for this topic, I am joined by our very own experts, being Nicole Bassett, Bleckmann Circularity Lead, and Hans Robben, the program manager of the Renewal Workshop. Thank you very much for being here today.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Nicole, Hans, to kick things off, what is circular fashion? And of course, can you briefly introduce yourself to the audience? Nicole.
Sure. Thank you for having me today.
It's a pleasure.
So my background has been in sustainability in the apparel sector for almost 20 years. And I worked on lots of different things around helping brands with their supply chain and their sustainable materials. And in 2015, I started a company called the Renewal Workshop to enable brands to participate in the circular economy by having a company that would do all the services and operations for them. I ran that company for a number of years. And then in 2022, we were acquired by Bleckmann. And so for the last 2 years, I've been part of the team here at Bleckmann working on circularity.
I'm Hans, within Bleckmann, the program manager for the Renewal Workshop. And with the Renewal Workshop, we take care of all the operational aspects of renewing items and preparing them for a second life, a third life, and so on.
Thank you, guys. So, Nicole, can you explain the core activities or, the core ingredients of a circular fashion economy?
I love circular fashion. It's really a huge opportunity and shift for the apparel industry outside of sustainability. So what is it? So it's kind of easiest to describe circular fashion when you think about it in contrast to linear fashion. So the linear way of thinking is the kind of business as usual today. Brands will make products from raw materials and then sell them. And then at the end of the use of those products by customers, they usually get sent to landfill or are incinerated.
Yeah.
The circular economy or the circular fashion world looks at business a lot differently. It's really rooted around three principles. One is that we design out waste and pollution. So we're no longer throwing anything away throughout the whole cycle, from the creation of the product to the end of the cycle. And we're also keeping products in use longer. So we're relying on business models like resale and used and rental and recycling of materials. We're not having anything be thrown away. And then the other principle is around regenerating natural capital. So we're thinking about where do these materials come from so that we're not exploiting the planet to do so. So circular fashion really is a sort of subset of a circular economy. And so circular fashion is the whole concept that brands are taking their products and thinking through it through their whole life cycle and generating a business around using the products multiple times and generating revenue multiple times and really kind of shifting the way business is done.
Right. And Hans, what are the benefits to the brands, the environment, and of course the consumers of a circular fashion economy?
Well, I think most importantly, there is the environmental impact, right? If you reuse an item, then you avoid a new item being made, you avoid new virgin materials being extracted from our planet.
Of course.
That's one. Second one is the economic benefit for the brands. They get to explore new opportunities for growth and a declining linear supply chain, basically. And for consumers, it's also an opportunity to explore new types of garments and to express themselves maybe as I'm a person that really cares for the environment and I'm wearing something that has already been worn before, or I'm renting an item and I'm not buying a new item. I'm not buying into the linear fashion industry.
Yeah. And Nicole, why do we now see that it is also the customers that are driving this push towards a more sustainable fashion practice? What we tend to call the green wave that is coming for us.
Yeah, I think what's super interesting is how much the world has changed since I was a kid. This awareness, this globalization, and this connectivity.
Yeah,
We didn't know what was happening and the impact of, say, the textile industry in India or in China 20 years ago. And now we know. We're also very much faced with the issues of pollution or the issues of climate
yeah,
change. And for a lot of people, they feel very pulled to do something for themselves. They want to make a change and they don't want to contribute to harm. And so, one of the actions that a lot of people take is looking at their own habits and buying practices and saying, okay, well, wait a minute. If I buy something that's pre owned or I can rent a product, then I'm not contributing to the making of new products.
right.
And so, you're starting to see a lot more people, spend their dollars in a way that is more environmental. And I think circularity has really shifted things for a lot of people because only in the last sort of 10 years or so has used or resale come online, and it makes it really easy to buy not new products. And so you're seeing a big growth in circularity with consumers there as well.
Yeah, and of course, I'm based in Europe, and I know that we're somewhat running the gauntlet on this one. But to what extent do you see that also the changing legislation is a contributing factor to, yeah, the ever quicker evolution of circularity?
Well, I think legislation is definitely an important factor, but it's not yet moving brands at the speed that they should be moving. Let's say we know, everybody knows that certainly within Europe by 2030 there will be the Green Deal translated into local binding legislation,
Yes,
but that's still 5 to 6 years from now. And so we see a bit of a hesitation at brands. What exactly will this legislation be? What way do we have to react to it? But it is clear that it will become mandatory to have circularity at the basis of your business model.
yeah, yeah,
And maybe I'll add to that, being based in the US, there isn't that same level of legislation. There's a couple of laws getting passed around textile waste or extended producer responsibility, but it's like a couple of states. Whereas what's happening in Europe is so important and it's a big deal. Like it's a real big deal because the industry has had the last 10, 15 years to voluntarily clean up
correct.
the
Yeah,
mess.
yeah,
And now legislation has come in and it's actually really robust and thoughtful
Yeah.
legislation looking at waste, looking at designing for circularity.
Mhm.
It's really thinking through all the components that are going to be needed to create a circular economy for the fashion industry.
yeah. Looking at the enormous peak in interest in fast fashion, I don't think it's a moment too soon. Yeah,
No.
so somewhat of a counter movement, so to speak.
Hmm.
Yeah, and so the fashion brands that are now embracing circularity, what do you or you too see as activities that these brands are doing to become more greener, leaner, circular?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things that are happening around circularity. So one thing I think is a helpful differentiator to think about is in sustainability, there was a lot of talk about I'm replacing my conventional cotton with organic.
Yeah,
There's a lot of swapping.
yeah,
Okay, I have my conventional polyester, now I have recycled polyester, all of that. In circularity, what's trickier is that we are talking about a systems change. We're talking about not only do your products have to change, but the whole business around it.
yeah.
So for a brand, that's a lot.
Cradle to grave. Yeah.
Yeah, and now we're shifting it to cradle to cradle.
Oh, correct. Of
Yeah.
course.
And so you can imagine everyone's doing business one way, and now you have to do it business a different way. So what we're seeing is there's a lot of things that have to change. And so you'll see a lot of opportunities. So for example, one of the biggest challenges in a circular economy is we don't know what the product is later on in its life.
Mhm,
You
mhm.
take the jacket home, you cut off the hang tag, you wear it for 2 years, and then you send it back to the brand. I have no idea what this jacket is or what its MSRP was or anything. So the introduction of digital ID is critical.
Mhm.
So there's legislation around the digital product passport, which is going to help push this forward. But for brands, if they put what's called a digital ID, so that could be a QR code, a barcode, an RFID on the product, it means that the future supply chain,
Hmm.
so your logistics providers or your repair shops or your recyclers, can scan the product and get a whole bunch of information. So that's one critical piece that's going to happen. The other big thing I would say that brands are starting to do is design their products in a way that they can get either repaired in a more efficient way, or they can actually be designed to be recycled.
Hmm.
And then the other one is looking at your operations and saying, okay, my operations are really good and efficient of going one direction. How do I start to engage with like my logistics partners or other people to bring the products back and move them around in a different way? So you're starting to see some brands invest in that.
Yeah, yeah. And do we have examples, Hans, on success stories, so to speak, of brands that are tapping into the existing possibilities at the moment?
Yeah, sure. We already do see a couple of brands launching their recommerce program or their rescue program. For example, we have COS, which is part of the H&M group, that is running a trade-in and resale program. So customers can send back pre-worn items. They get a voucher in return for them. We renew these items in our facilities and we prepare them for resale, and they are then sold in, I think it's about 17 stores now across Europe, in a separate corner as a restore collection.
Yeah.
But we also have a company like Otrium, for example, the online outlet platform, which is suffering from high rates of returns, as is overall the case, I think, in the fashion industry.
Yeah.
And they decided to have all their damaged returns repaired back to new state so that they can be sold as new. And that's a pretty maybe easy step to take, but still we don't see a lot of brands doing this. The common practice is still, if a return is damaged, and we stockpile it on the pile of damaged items, and then after a couple of years, typically they are discarded. Whereas we see that 50% of these damaged returns can be brought back to a new state and can be sold as a new item again at the value of the new item. So that's definitely an interesting way of starting in circularity for a brand. And those items that cannot be brought back to a new state can then be brought back to a state that is still of enough quality for a recommerce program, for example, in the future. So there are enough best practices already out there for brands to get inspired by.
Good. Good to hear that there's already so much experience and expertise around, and that brands that are now being persuaded to start looking into it don't have to reinvent the wheel over and over again.
Exactly.
Very good. Another important component of the cradle to cradle circular economy or fashion economy is, of course, the consumer.
Mhm.
And what role can the consumer play, to your opinion?
Well, as a consumer now, as Nicole already pointed out, you have a lot more information about what is the garment that I'm buying, where is it coming from, how polluting is it if I buy a new garment, and so you can make a conscious choice not to buy a new item, for example, but to rent an item or to buy it second hand. And so each time you make this choice, there is less resources being taken from the earth to make a new item, and so you contribute positively to this transition that we have to make. And maybe you influence your friend, your cousin, your peers, and they also start doing the same or showing the same behavior, let's say, and then industry, next to the obligation, the legal obligation, will also be moved by consumer choice in the direction of circularity.
And do you foresee that later on we move away from naming the recycled or the circular product differently than to the linear or first sale product?
Yeah, I think the one of the great examples is if you look at the car industry, right? You can buy a new car or a pre-owned certified car right next to it, and you get the quality from you go to the brand because they have like the certification and the
Yeah.
quality that
Yeah.
you can expect. But also cars are designed to be dismantled and to use those parts again, and there's services around that. So I think if we think about what the future potentially can look like, is that apparel brands behave a lot more like that, and that the businesses are designed so that revenue is not just coming from selling new things. We've actually diversified revenue, and it's coming from the pre-owned certified things, it's coming from services. And I think this is a really critical investment that companies have to start making, because we can't keep just doing business the way we're doing it
No.
today. Our planet is sounding the warning lights. We're running out of resources, or the resources we have are really getting strained. And so here's an opportunity to get ahead of the game, set your business up for the future. So as the supply chain is more disrupted, or access to materials is more disrupted, you as a company have really thought through, okay, I can handle this because my business is a lot more resilient inside of a circular one.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much for your valuable insights. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have today. But making sure that when brands want to reach out and learn more about what we do, or more specifically what they can do to become, or to have a jump start in circularity, how can these companies reach out to you?
Well, I think just reach out to us via the website, leave a message, and we will get back into contact with them.
Perfect. Thanks again for being here today, guys, and thank you for your insights.
Thank you.
Thank you, Erik.
And for you, thank you very much for joining us today. Another insightful episode, and stay tuned for the next one. Thank you.